Hi, this is Audrey, and this is a talk on thought stopping, which is a therapeutic technique that I've used a lot as a counselor. So, first of all, thought stopping is mostly used in CBT therapy. It is an intervention that some therapists use with the goal of helping people that have negative thoughts either interrupt, remove, or replace negative thought patterns that they're having. Um, and it works really well. So hopefully I can explain it in such a way that you can either try and use it yourself, or if you're a counselor, try to use it with your clients. So first, I just want to go through some different kinds of thinking that might lead to wanting to do thought stopping. So a lot of people, pretty much all of us, have probably at some point or other experienced one of these patterns of thinking. But they can be really difficult for people that do it often. So the first one is just all or nothing thinking, which the term that I usually use is black and white thought process. I talk a lot about it in DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. It's where people can't really find the gray area and the middle ground. They kind of think in all or nothing terms of like everything is good or everything is bad. If everything is good, great. But for a lot of people that have that thought process, they usually tend to ruminate on the negative. The second one is overgeneralization. It's we do that quite a bit where there's a single negative event that happens and we kind of see it as a never-ending pattern. So you make one mistake or something goes poorly and you think that that's just the way it always is. A mental filter is when you pick out a single negative event of something that happened and just dwell on that. So there could be a lot of other things that happened in whatever story you're telling yourself, but you're only going to focus on the negative detail. Discounting the positive is another thing that people tend to do, or they just sort of, if there's something positive about a situation, it's like they act like it didn't happen because, again, they're focusing on the negative. And then jumping to conclusion, that's usually when people kind of make up their mind before they have the facts. Another term that you use, mind reading or fortune telling. So acting as if you know the way that other people feel about you when obviously you don't. Some other thought processes, magnification, which I also think is pretty similar to catastrophizing. We use the term catastrophizing a lot in counseling. Most people have done it at some point in time, and it really is the making a mountain out of a molehill. So it's when you exaggerate the importance of your problems or shortcomings and make it much bigger than it is. So for a lot of people, it's like they might have a breakup or something like that. And at the time, they might be like, oh my God, my life is over. I'm never going to meet anyone again. No one will ever love me. That's catastrophizing because that's not really true. In that moment, you might be very heartbroken and it might feel really crippling, but it is not the way you're going to feel in 6 months or a year. Emotional reasoning is when you assume that the negative emotions that you're having reflect the way things really are, when in fact they're just negative emotions that you've associated with that event. Should statements, shoulda, coulda, woulda. So, should statements are when you kind of say, well, this is the way it should have happened, and not really what did happen. I talk about this also in radical acceptance, which I did a different video on, about how some people have a hard time accepting the way things are, and they instead ruminate and focus on the way things should be if they went their way. Labeling, we've all done that before. It's when you attach negative labels onto yourself or others. I have a lot of clients who say, I'm stupid, or I'm not smart enough, or they'll say no one likes me. Those are labels that you're giving yourself. And obviously, if you give yourself those labels, they sometimes you internalize them. And same when you do that to other people. When you look at someone who did something bad and you just think they're all bad as opposed to just an action they did being a bad action. And then personalization and blame. It's when we personalize things and hold yourself responsible for events that are not always under your control. And if you blame yourself or other people for problems, this is also kind of goes along with the black and white thought process stuff. So I mentioned these kinds of twisted thinking as just these are the kind of thought processes that sometimes lead to why we would use a technique like thought stopping. So first of all, there are things you can do is to challenge unhelpful thoughts. And in counseling with people that have a lot of, negative ruminating thoughts, I do what we call reality testing. So I talk to them about, this thought process they have, and you can challenge it. You can say, do you have any evidence that contradicts what you're saying. And a lot of times there is like another truth, if you will. Also, identifying patterns that are unhelpful. A lot of people that have ruminating or obsessive thoughts, there is a pattern. Like the thoughts are sometimes brought on by certain things. So if you can find out what the trigger is for your unhelpful thoughts, that can be really helpful. I like this one. What would you say to a friend who was in your situation having this thought? So if you had a friend that came up to you and said, you know what, I keep having this thought over and over again that I'm an idiot, you'd say to them, no, you're really smart. You went to college. You're a good student. You'd talk them out of it. You'd also show them proof otherwise. So what would you tell yourself then? You can also do a cost benefit analysis of why of this thought process. Why is it helpful to you and why does it hurt you? I like this one too. How will you feel about it in 6 months from now? Like when I was talking about breakups, this idea of like, no one will ever love me again, this idea, but will you really feel that way in 6 months? Chances are no. Are there other ways of looking at the situation? A lot of it, what I do with people is try to help them take a step back and have more of a perspective. Because a lot of the reasons why we have dark, negative thoughts is because we don't have a lot of perspective. We're just thinking about what's happening right now and not stepping back and thinking about what this will look like in a larger scope of our life. And also trying to get people that have negative thoughts to say something more balanced about a more balanced statement and try to stick with that. So now I'm actually going to just show you my version of thought stopping. I'm going to move my face a little bit to the middle here. So I made this page based on my version of the technique that I teach people for how to do thought stopping. So first of all, up here, the blue kind of zigzag that says trigger thought, that is whatever thought it is that you're having that's particularly distressing. I worked with someone once who used to have this reoccurring thought about his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. And so he would think about that, and that was a big trigger for him. And then once he started thinking about it, he would get more and more upset, and it's what I call a thought spiral, go way down, and of course it affects your mood, and you get really stuck in it. So thought stopping, the technique is basically instead of following that thought process, you have to stop it. And so the stop sign over here is in your head, you literally can think of it like a stop sign. Some people would say stop out loud or no. I actually like the other ones, rubber band, or like a hair elastic like this, take it, put it on around your wrist, and you can use it to snap yourself every time you start having a thought that you consider to be a trigger thought. You can pinch yourself, obviously not that hard, you don't want to leave a mark, but just pinching yourself to say stop. Fingernails in the palm is this technique where assuming you have fingernails, where you just rub it into your palm, and it's pretty jarring, kind of wakes you up a little bit. So that's another way of saying, okay, stop it. And then after you do the stop of that thought, you have to kind of come up with a diversionary thought, like a different thought. And that thought should be neutral or positive stimuli. I put 3 things that I have used when I've done this technique. One is kittens, because kittens are cute, but the other one used to be tiny houses. I think tiny houses are very cool. So when I would have a thought I didn't like, I would say in my mind, stop it, or I'd pinch myself or do the rubber band. And then I would start thinking about tiny houses, or even if I was on a device, I could even look at pictures of tiny houses. And in my mind, maybe I would think about if I was going to build a tiny house, what would it look like? How would I arrange it? How would I decorate it? And then on the other side is a camper, which there's a new term called glamper, and I'm really into campers that are cool and retro. So that's another thing I could think about. So these are just 3 of the ones that I might think about, tiny houses, kittens, and glampers, but I'm sure you might be able to think of other things that are either, again, neutral or a positive stimuli. For the client I worked with who had that thought about his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, when he would do this exercise, I think he pinched himself, and then he would start thinking about what he was going to have for dinner that night, and he would plan it out really meticulously. So he'd think, okay, what are the ingredients? Which ones do I have at home? Which ones do I need to go to the store to buy? And he would just plan out what he was going to have for dinner and how he was going to make it. And that was his way of doing thought stopping. So hopefully this makes sense, this exercise. But the idea is just when you have the thought is to not follow it, to not engage with it, and instead to very consciously say, nope, I'm not going to do that, and then have a backup plan for what you are going to do instead. There are other versions of thought stopping. If you look online, you'll find all kinds of different ones. Some of them are also where you think about the thought that's bothering you. Like that would be that guy thinking about his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. I personally, as a therapist, don't think it really makes sense to engage thoughts that are not particularly helpful. In fact, I will show you this slide, which is one of my favorites. It says, "Don't engage, don't enrage." And we use this term a lot in counseling, especially for people that might be either related to someone or know someone who has a personality disorder, such as borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, like Trump. And the idea being is that if you don't want to basically get in conflict with someone who tends to upset you, then don't engage them. And I would make the argument that you should also not engage thoughts that don't help you. So instead of engaging a thought that is destructive to you, that makes you feel bad, just don't engage it at all, and then you won't upset yourself. I also wanted to just show a quick little thing for children. I'll move my face over here now. So just so you know, thought stopping might not work for kids. It certainly might be helpful for like a teenager who has the cognitive ability to do what I just talked about. But for adults, I would for children, maybe not. So instead, these are just some strategies for kids. One of them is to say stop in your mind, snap your fingers. That's another one that you could do, by the way, snapping your fingers. Imagine a big red stop sign like we talked about. I like this one. Picture your worry as a bug and squash it. Picture your worry as a balloon and pop it. Get up and move. I would tell everyone that if you are feeling, if your thoughts are too in your head, grounding exercises where you feel your hands, feel your body, go do something, go take a walk and do something different. Sing a song, replay a memory, set a timer. These are all just ones that they suggest for doing with kids. But again, I'm going to go back to the slide that I made to end things. And this is what I would focus on for yourself if you're having trigger thoughts, or if you want to teach this technique or learn about this technique, is just purely the idea of stopping the trigger thought with some sort of symbolism. Rubber band, pinch self, fingernails on palm. Also the snap, that could be a good one too. Saying no or stop, either in your mind or out loud, and just making sure you have some sort of backup plan for what you're going to think about instead. Because we have devices, you can always go on your device and have your backup plan right there, whether it's pictures of tiny houses, glampers, or kittens, or whatever it is that you're into. Or maybe your diversionary thought process is to listen to a podcast or a book on tape or something, which is basically a distraction. But whatever works. So I hope this is helpful for, if you want to try thought stopping or at least understand the idea behind it. And thanks for listening.